You're listening to a Monster Kid podcast.
Hi and welcome to A Dingo Ate My Movie, a podcast that features classic Ozploitation and other slightly left of centre and overlooked Australian films from the 70s, 80s and beyond. I'm your host Pete, and today I'm joined by Jay to discuss the Much Stunt, Much Rock, Stunt Rock from 1978. In December 1977, director Brian Trenchard Smith had an idea while in the shower that he hoped would propel stuntman Grant Page into an international star. In the 30 minutes that followed, Trenchard Smith hammered out a 6-page outline of what would eventually become Stunt Rock. The film follows Grant Page travelling to America to perform stunt work on a TV series called Undercover Girl. Page also meets up with his cousin Curtis Hyde of the band Sorcery, where Hyde plays the part of the Prince of Darkness, who is locked in a nightly battle with the King of the Wizards, accompanied by heavy metal music from the band. Grant's reckless behaviour captures the attention of newspaper reporter Lois, who is currently writing a story about the career-obsessed star of Undercover Girl, Monique van der Ven. What follows is an adrenaline-filled mixture of ever more dangerous stunts and the theatric rock of Sorcery. Join me and Jay as we discuss the over-the-top action and pounding soundtrack of Stunt Rock. Hey Jay, how are you, mate?
I am doing great, Pete. I will not reply in an Australian accent.
I was waiting. I thought maybe you would, but
no, I was actually censured by the Australian Parliament the last time.
Did you get an official letter with a seal and everything? Yeah,
I did. The House actually voted to fine me, but the Senate just sent a letter of censure. So I ducked the financial responsibility, but I'm not allowed to come within 100 feet of an Australian accent.
I heard there was a bit of a ruckus in the American embassy at the time.
Just stop. Don't.
It was like international relations sort of took a bit of a hit.
It did. We dipped, and it was all my fault, and I'm so sorry.
Well, you know what? That episode, besides being the longest episode that I've done, is the most downloaded episode still to date.
Well, I'll tell you. First of all, that's flattering, being your guest on the episodes. But secondly, it makes sense only because of the film. That film was magic.
Yeah, we're talking about Waking Fright
to today's film.
It's a different kind of magic today.
And I sort of feel as if you might have pitched me this film as relief from that one, because that one was a really deep thinker, and it was really well acted, really well directed. Not to say this one wasn't well directed. I don't mean that at all.
Yeah.
But it's not, I wouldn't exactly call this one a deep thinker, would you?
Oh no, absolutely not. It's it's effectively a promo reel for Grant Page.
Yeah. I don't want to call it a non-thinker, but you don't have. I watched it twice in anticipation, and the first time I just had other things, like I kept getting interrupted, and when I came back, I felt as if I didn't miss anything.
Yeah.
You know?
It's pretty straight up movie. It's fun though.
That was great fun.
But there's definitely a difference between Wake in Fright and the movie we're talking about today, which is Stunt Rock. It's very different. But, you know, it's a fun movie. Like, it kind of doesn't know whether it's a documentary, a mockumentary, or a film. That's the feeling I get from it. It's
a lot of. I wonder if Rob Reiner had seen this when he made This Is Spinal Tap. I really do, because it felt a lot like an actual live version of a real band.
Yeah,
I went back and looked it up, and turns out Sorcery, the band featured in the film, was an actual Los Angeles-based band. In fact, I had read that they had tapped Foreigner, the band Foreigner.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the notes I had, that he approached Foreigner, and the only reason Foreigner didn't do the gig was because they had a tour that was going on and they couldn't find the time.
Yeah, but they were interested. Now, and it makes me look back and think to myself, boy, they might have dodged a bullet on that one, right?
Yeah,
or do you think it would have helped their
I don't know.
what
chances? What sort of movie would it have been without them? Like with Foreigner, it would have been a completely different movie, because you wouldn't have had all that, all the stage theatrical antics and all the other stuff. It would have been very different.
I'm looking forward to talking to you about that. That was something special.
Yeah, it was. I think it probably would have been a little bit less interesting, actually, had Foreigner been the band in this movie.
Yeah, you're right, because you're exactly right. The sort of sideshow / theatrical component of the two characters who are non-musical characters of the band, Sorcery, would have been completely excluded. So yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. That it would, unfortunately, we would have had to focus on the quality of just the music. It starts with a stunt where Paige is ziplining across the Gap.
Yeah, it is. It's a Gap in Sydney. Yeah.
Okay. It's funny. At the beginning of the film, it starts with this sort of like buff guy, probably mid-30s. Would you say? It's hard to say his age. He's a little bit.
He's 82. He's 82 now. He was born in 1939.
Okay, so he was closing in on 40 at the time, then, right?
Yeah.
So he, so anyway, this sort of tan buff dude is just walking along the cliff at the Gap, and then suddenly, seemingly, just decides, spur of the moment, to rock climb down the wall to the seabed, and it's cool footage. It's kind of shocking to watch this man just kind of shrug his shoulders and leap over the side of a cliff. But then that's how they set him up as the character of Stunts and the main character of the film. And the long stunt is he ziplines sort of at probably a more perilous than 45-degree angle straight down, and then about halfway through he drops into the water at the Gap.
Yeah. There's actually a lot of those stunts take place in two places. One's at the Gap, and one is at North Head. They're kind of sort of close, but not really close. Like North Head is sort of across the other side of the harbour and out towards the ocean, and the Gap's, I think, the other way. I should know this. I live in Sydney. I've lived here all my life. But anyway, and a couple of the ones he does at North Head, and then there's the ones at the Gap. Really interesting story. I was listening to, so I got the Blu-ray. Umbrella just released a fantastic Blu-ray of this with a fantastic transfer of the film. It's got most of the same extras as the other releases. However, it's got like an updated interview with Brian Trenchard Smith and his wife. It's a really good interview. It goes for about an hour and a bit. But it's a really cool interview, and he talks about lots of things. One of the things he talked about was, because he did a lot of stuff with Grant Page, have had a really long professional relationship. And Grant Page was going to show him how to cliff climb and climb on cliffs. So they went to North Head, and he took him down the wall of all the cliff faces. And he was showing him how to get around and teaching him how to do all this stuff. He had to eventually get to a point where he had to have this faith to sort of put his leg out and around a corner and pull himself around this corner while they're kind of pressed up hard against the wall, against the cliff face. He got him around that, and it was amazing. He sort of said to him that, you've just got to think about the fact that you've got to make sure your feet are in the right place, and that you've always got 3 out of 4 limbs. You always have 3 attached to something, and you could see the experience he had. And he actually got him he told the story. He got him to the bottom, and this apparently the track they used was like an old track that years ago fishermen used to use to get down to the bottom of the cliff and go rock fishing.
Oh, that's cool.
And when they got to the bottom, there's these fishermen down there, and they said to them, "Why did you come that way? There's this other way that's so much easier."
There's a path right around the corner. What are you idiots up to?
So it's quite funny, but it's interesting, and I think Grant Page kind of talks about it a couple of times in the movie and he espouses on it in private, in other interviews, that you sort of, when you do the work he does, you just have faith that everything's going to be fine, and you plan it out to the nth degree. And interesting enough, Grant Page was a physics teacher originally.
That makes sense.
Younger years. So a lot of that would be relate to a lot of this sort of stuff, especially the bit, the shot with him basically as a slingshot on a slingshot.
Yeah.
I think that's in this movie at the start. Yeah. So a lot of interesting background. This movie is kind of like cuts from other things that they've done together, like Danger Freaks they did and things like that.
Yeah, and there's an extended scene from, I don't know if it was used in the film, but another film you and I were going to potentially talk about was Mad Dog Morgan. And there's an actual full, and in fact, that one, whether he knew he was or not, Dennis Hopper actually makes a cameo in this film in the outtakes. From that, and it's interesting too, because you can see him, as I recall, it was a stunt that they were going to reverse the film, where he was like,
that's right,
he was being expunged from the water on fire, and then he had to sort of so when they rolled it forward, prior to reversing, obviously he had to lay on top of Dennis Hopper on fire, to make it look as if Dennis Hopper jumped up and jumped off a cliff into some burning on fire, by the way, into water. And right at the cut, you can see Dennis Hopper in a relatively concerned state, sort of trying to leap
his
out
face,
of
he looks terrified.
He looks not thrilled to be there. And I thought maybe there was a problem with the stunt, but I think it was actually outtakes of how it was planned to be done. When I would have looked at when I watched it again, but I don't blame him at all. It was terrifying.
No, it's a lot of. Oh, I imagine if you've got fire sort of almost on top of you, which he did, you sort of want to get away quick. Yeah. So he's done, like, if you look at Grant Page on, I looked up his Wikipedia and his IMDb. He has, as far as stunt work, he's got like 107 credits in stunt work. So obviously, and still to this day, like he's 82, and he still does stunt coordinating, and obviously he doesn't do stunts, but he does stunt coordinating. In this interview with Brian Trenchard Smith on the Blu-ray, he said that Grant Page had recently said to him that when he turns 85, he wants to roll a car. On his 85th birthday. And Brian Trenchard Smith said, well, I'd be happy to film it for him for his 85th birthday. So,
he's a good mate. Yeah. I don't know. I think I would choose to do something else for my 85th birthday, but we'll see. I haven't reached that milestone yet. So maybe Pete,
he still looks pretty good.
And the other thing that's kind of cool about Page in general is that this is, it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek film, because I think he realized and everybody realized we're not doing Shakespeare here. But there are some really cool moments where he's okay. So Grant Page, the character, is kind of courting Lois, who's played, like you said, by Margaret Gerard, which is Trenchard Smith's wife. Even at the time, they had been married a few years prior to this film.
They were married within 16 days of meeting each other. Yeah.
Well, she's a knockout. And apparently she's very smart too. She looks like a blonde Marlee Matlin, Marley Matlin's a major heartthrob for me. So the minute I saw this woman, I was like, little tiny like bubble hearts appeared around my head. And she's not a bad actress, to be fair, but I don't know if you knew this, she has a doctorate in Byzantine history.
Yeah.
And she became, I think she's a professor somewhere in Oregon, if I recall, maybe at the University of Oregon. There, she lives there with Trenchard Smith, and they have they raise their sons there and so forth. She's American and he's an Aussie. So,
he's originally British.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he came to Australia because he said that he couldn't get the opportunities he wanted to be a director in the UK. It was going to take him too long. The film industry was so sort of staid and it was very hard to get ahead. So he decided to come to a fledgling film industry in Australia where he could make his mark. And he started off basically working with like in TV, like with doing TV shows. And then he did these couple of shows with Grant Page, a couple of, things. I think he did this thing called The Stuntmen and Kung Fu Killers. And his first major film with Grant Page was The Man from Hong Kong.
Man from Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Which I think you covered with the lovely Tab, if I remember correctly.
That one was Brandon.
Oh no, that's right.
Yeah.
You did that one with Dr. Brandon, and Tab, I think, was the Dead End Drive-In.
Dead End Drive-In, and also recently did, I don't know if you listened to Starstruck. We did Starstruck as well.
That was a great episode.
That was a fun episode there, yeah. Yeah, so he did a lot of work with him. These two guys go back a long way. Obviously.
Yeah, you got to tell there's affection for Grant. What I started to say was there's so the character of Grant is courting the character of Lois, played by Margaret, the director's wife, and he actually, I'm sure this was unscripted. He said, I'm sure Brent. It's obvious that Trenchard Smith kind of just said to his friend, explain to her how this stunt is done, because part of the plot, if you will. Is there a plot to this, Pete?
Not
there
really.
Kind of is, a little bit.
Sort of. There's a narrative. Yeah.
Narrative. That's a good word. I like that one. But she meets this fella and she starts to care about him, and eventually she shies away because his work is so dangerous, and he courts her basically by doing more stupid, dangerous stuff, but explaining how he does it. And to be fair to Page, he's a very articulate, self-aware, self-actualized guy. He thinks a lot about what he's doing and how to do it, not necessarily why to do it. Although he does go into why as well a little bit. He talks about ego and how ego actually brings you to become a stuntman, but it also is what in theory can kill you as a stuntman. So you have to kind of rein it in. And that part, I mean, for a not very deep film, I felt was kind of cool insight into the mind of somebody who does this kind of work.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, it's obviously, I think what he was getting at is that ego gets you there, but you need to sort of park it once you're kind of doing it,
Yeah.
To do the work that they do, that stuntmen do, you would have to be, it takes a certain person, right? It would be someone that from probably 2 years old, they were climbing trees and doing all sorts of, stuff. And I think he says that he was always the one that was, wanted everyone to see him doing something stupid or crazy. And it kind of just transferred, to that role, that job. So very interesting.
Yeah, there's little montages throughout the whole film of just basically back to back to back. It's hard to explain because they happen in such rapid succession that it almost is numbing. Like you'll see, presumably it's him, right? Like jetting a motorcycle over a lake and like spilling off the motorcycle from a far height, rappelling off buildings and being lit on fire. And then like there's one stunt that happens a little bit further in the film where he's in this I know we'll go into it, I suppose, but he's playing the stuntman for this Undercover Girl TV series in the States, and the Undercover Girl basically fires a flare or a rocket and blows up his van, and he he flies through the windshield of the van on fire. And I was going, whoa. And it's super hyper close up. And even with the relatively low res version that I watched, you can tell that's Page, and he's on fire, and he's doing his best to get through the stunt and so forth. I love the end of that one, by the way. There's this really sort of smarmy, nerdy film director, TV director, who comes up to him afterwards, and he just has all these stupid short one-liners, and he walks up and he says, it wasn't bad.
That director.
He flies through the windshield on fire.
I know.
And they come and put him out, and he's laying there like half singed, and the director walks up with his arms folded, and he goes, it was okay.
It's okay. Yeah. And there's the one earlier in the shot where he's obviously playing some criminal who gets shot from a great height. And the first time he does it, the squib doesn't go off properly, and the director's, having conniptions about that and going on. Then he goes and does it again, and he gets off the pad that he lands on, and he says, "Was that good enough for you?" sort of thing. And the director's like, "Oh, kind of, it was okay."
Yeah, the director blames him for the squibs. I'm like, "What are you doing, dude?" He says, "What happened to the squibs?"
Guys.
And he said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Only one of the squibs went off. What's wrong with you?" And he's like, and the Page is yelling back at him, "Well, what do you want me to actually bleed? Do you want me to cut my wrists? I'll do it.
Yeah.
What do you want from me?" And he says, "Well, get up
pressed
there
the
and
button.
do it right."
He did the right thing.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
he did exactly the right thing. So yeah, he's a funny guy.
So the idea for this film came to Brian Trenchard Smith while he was having a shower in 1977. He was thinking, and this is a quote that I've read a couple of times, and I've also heard him say he must have it kind of memorized. But he was thinking, famous stuntman meets famous rock group, much stunt, much rock. The kids will go bananas. So it was made for an audience, of probably younger people.
I would further say it's kind of like young boys, really, right?
Yeah,
I mean, mostly sure. young, like I would say. Young teen boys, because as I watched it, I was like, I could feel my 40 self was like, okay, it's kind of fun, and but my 12, 13-year-old self left back there in the dust was like, I felt like Beavis and Butthead. I was like, fire.
Yeah, it's got all the stuff that 12-year-old kids like. Yeah,
like beautiful girls and skid tight jumpers.
It's really cool. He wrote a 6-page outline in half an hour once he got out of the shower, and he sent it off to a European distributor who had spoken to him before, I think, and said to him, "If you got anything good, send it to me." So he was then invited to a meeting, and he was given the green light to make the film on the proviso that the film was completed in 6 months. So the film had to be made in 6 months. Trenchard Smith's been quoted saying it happened too quick. He said it was a film that went from a 6-page treatment to a stereo answer print in 4.5 months. He said that's no way to make a feature.
Well, and to be fair to him, it wasn't as if they had like 6 months shooting time.
Yeah.
They had 6 months to
make it,
plan each one of these crazy, insane stunts, which, a 30-second stunt in the film must have taken at least 3-4 weeks to plan properly.
Once he got the green light, he went with Grant Page, and they did some of the stunts that you see at the start in Sydney. And then they flew to the US, and he did some stunts over there. Most of the stunts were unauthorized. So there's a story, one of the shots, you see him, he's standing on the ledge of the Empire State Building in New York.
Yeah.
And that was totally, so there was apparently security. You would never do it these days because there's probably cameras everywhere, right? But remember, this is 1977 probably when they're shooting this. They're at the top of the Empire State Building, and Brian Trenchard Smith's got his little hand crank 16 mil or whatever it is kind of under his coat. And they get up there and they're working out how long it takes the security guys to make a circle around the deck. So they time it, and then they work out the median time. And he goes, "Okay, you've probably got this long to do it." So as soon as the security guys were out of their sight,
Yeah.
Grant Page climbed over something you probably would not be able to climb over yourself, and got down on the ledge and was looking over the side of the Empire State Building. Brian Trenchard Smith there filming him.
Yeah.
Then they start coming back, so he scurries back over the top and gets back there. And when the security guys come around, they sort of think it's something a bit sus is happening, and they sort of say, "Oh, what's going on?" And they're both standing there, and Brian Trenchard Smith says, "Oh, we're just doing some sort of travelogue thing for Australia, and we're just doing this filming and whatnot." And they had no idea that in the meantime that he jumped over and been on the ledge of the Empire State Building.
He did. He jumps. You're right. It's about a 15-second shot, right, where he basically is on a little tiny pedestal on the outside of the safety rail.
Yeah.
And he's holding the rail, and then he lets go of the rail and puts his hands on his hips and looks straight down.
Yeah. I couldn't do that.
No, I could hardly do it like standing at the edge of the rail looking over, let alone beyond the rail. And then likewise, I had the same thought that makes sense because that did not look like an authorized shot.
Yeah.
And there's some other shots too where he's climbing or swinging off the top of Coit Tower in San Francisco, rappelling off Coit Tower, which that's sort of a beloved landmark. I would kind of doubt that they had permission to film there. Mm-hmm. And likewise, one of the other shots are in Los Angeles, except for the scaling of what I think is the South Tower of London.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Where he literally is just without any safety equipment, scaling the Tower of London from the base of the bridge and up.
Yeah.
I guess not Tower of London. London Bridges.
Yeah,
right?
something
It's
like that.
The South Tower of London Bridge.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And clearly this is all him, or at least somebody who looks remarkably like him. But
it's him. Yeah.
So they're the little montages of him doing those things, and so it makes sense that they kind of just were doing guerrilla filmmaking.
Yeah, it's amazing the bit where he's on the light doing the pull-ups in front of Tower Records, and that was the same thing. They were just walking through Los Angeles, and Grant Page said to Brian Trenchard Smith, "Oh, I could just climb up there and do some pull-ups on there." And he said, "Okay, I've got my camera, let's do it." So he just went up, and they're gone by the time any police or anything's called or get there, they're gone. They're done.
Yep. In a New York minute, they're out.
They're out. Pretty amazing.
Each one of those stunts lasts about the length of a Ramones song, and then they're out.
Yeah, it does.
Get in the van. Yeah. We're taking off. We're going to get arrested.
Imagine trying to do that these days. Like you would never do the Empire State Building thing. You would never do because there's just security cameras everywhere now. And
there are, and the safety protocols are such that I think there are 20-foot gates in front of you, so that there's no way you could. Well, I mean, you could, but they'd get you far before you got over that 20-foot gate.
So. Yeah, I think so too. It was very interesting. Apparently, Monique van der Ven, who plays the lead in this movie, the lead as in the
she's
TV
the undercover
show.
Girl. Yeah,
she's the undercover girl. So she was Dutch, and you can tell it was rewritten. The whole script was rewritten for her because the distributor's like, well, she's quite well known in her home country, so let's put her in this, and we can actually be able to sell more of the film. She's been in a lot of films. Like she started acting in 1973. She's actually now she's a director as well. And she's an actor and director. Yeah. Yeah.
She's directed quite a bit, and she's still, by the way, also gorgeous woman.
Yeah. Lovely.
A really, really nice looking lady, just like Margaret. And one of the fun things about the film is, again, appealing to the 13-year-old boy fantasy of being in a career that basically where you blow things up and drive cars way too fast and light yourself on fire for a living. It's not dramatically done, but it's it's clear kind of earlier in the film that there's kind of a bit of a love triangle where each one of these women are interested in him.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a point at which Monique asks him, "I'd like to drive." Part of the plot is that she wants to do her own stunts, and her agent, played by this a really interesting actor, wants to protect her because her face is gold and she's an up and coming star, and he doesn't want her to get hurt because she's his meal ticket. But she wants authenticity. And there's a point at which he said, "Well, can you teach me how to drive like this?" And there's this funny scene where he says, "Sure, yeah, come on." And everybody gets in this, but both women get in the car with him. So one of them is hugging his passenger side arm, and the other one is like draped over his shoulders. And I'm like, my 13-year-old was like,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And he's taking him for that drive, that really fast drive around LA.
Yeah. Pointing out how certain stunts would be done. And then he's pointing and sort of describing with the music over, and they cut to various,
Gone in 60 seconds, actually.
Yeah. Car stunts.
The original,
that were done.
Gone in 60 seconds. All those stunts and the police chase.
Yeah.
That's in the film. Yeah.
Well, here's the question though. Was he, because I looked that up, Pete, and I couldn't tell. Was he involved?
No. They just decided they would put it in.
Okay. Right. Because Trenchard Smith wasn't involved. That was a different director. I can't remember that director's name, but yeah.
Yeah. So it was just put in there to show lots of car stunts. And once again, like you said, 13-year-old boys would just think it was amazing. So
this more than 13-year-old boy thought that it was amazing. But, my response to the film is a little tempered now because I guess you kind of lose that. I guess you lose that wonder, Pete, as time goes by.
You do a little bit, yeah, as you get older. Yeah. So there's the first part of the movie that kind of gets you into the story, inverted commas, is him doing a
That's about right, man. I'm going to tell you a story, air quotes, about a movie, air quotes. Sorry, I couldn't resist. But
that's true.
So you're right, to get you into the story.
Yeah. He does this stunt that goes wrong and he ends up in the hospital. The stunt that they put in the movie was from a stunt he did in 1977 on an Australian variety show called The Don Lane Show. It was one of those nighttime variety shows. And the stunt actually went wrong and he was actually injured in that stunt. So they used that footage.
Oh, my goodness.
At this part of the movie. He actually went back to the show in 1983 and did the stunt again. And it went fine this time.
Can I just describe to the listeners, this stunt is insane. Like, of all the stunts in the film, this one in particular, I was like, what are you doing? He basically is standing in an alley or a narrow roadway, a one-car roadway, with a car speeding at him probably anywhere from 45 to 50 miles per hour. And he's just standing motionless. He times a leap into the air so that he is going to roll up the hood onto the top of the car and presumably off the back or to the side. But it gave me so much anxiety just watching this car race towards him at full speed. And there's clearly no safety harnesses or wires or anything like that to keep him safe. It's completely his own reflexes. If he times it wrong, and he didn't even time it wrong, but if he did, he's dead. But what happens in that footage that you just mentioned is that he jumps onto the you call it the bonnet,
the hood of the car.
Is the bonnet?
Or the bonnet? Bonnet's
is that
fine.
how you say it? A bonnet, yeah.
Bonnet, hood, yeah.
Hood. He jumps onto the hood and then he starts to roll towards the windshield, which then breaks. When he hits it, it breaks, and that was unintentional. And then there's a peculiar movement of his body where he literally looks like a crash test dummy. And apparently he was concussed.
Yeah.
As a result of, yeah.
Yeah. Just before we came on, I was reading an interview with him and he was talking about that stunt and how it went wrong. He said, what's supposed to happen is the other driver of the car is usually a stunt man as well, which he was. But what's supposed to happen is the car gets to a certain speed and just before it hits him, they put their foot on the brake, and then what happens is the hood of the car sort of goes down a little bit because of the forces, stopping the car, and it makes it easier for him to roll up and over.
Sure.
Whereas it didn't happen that night. It didn't go down enough, and he basically went into the window.
Yeah.
It was supposed to help him go over the top of the car. Yeah. He's probably done that stunt hundreds of times.
Yeah. Well, it's a terrifying stunt, and the window breaks, and then you see it's one of those faces of death moments where you see this human body, but my brain refused to recognize the actual footage as a human body sort of just moving motionless.
Flopping.
Yeah, exactly. Flopping away from this moving vehicle. And I thought, oh, look at that crash test dummy move over to the side. And then, of course, they have footage of everybody running over to him to see if he's all right, which clearly he was not. But they used it as a segue to put him into the hospital in the States, which is where perfect segue into a love interest story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just trying to think how. So what happens, right? She picks the journalist picks him up from the hospital, and the first time I watched it, I was thinking, he didn't know her.
No.
Why would she be going to pick him up from the hospital?
Yeah, I got the impression that she went there to interview him because she thought he was interesting from seeing this footage. Saying,
"Yeah, that's true."
Okay, so Lois is doing her name. Yeah, her character name is Lois. Is doing. She's a journalist doing a piece on people who are very career driven, people who are so committed to their careers that they can't really think of anything else. And she thought, oh, he'd be a great subject. So she goes over there and she pulls off the main strip into the hospital in her convertible, which is fortunate because she dares to look up, and he's basically snuck out of his hospital 5th floor hospital window to escape, and he's in his hospital gown. Basically, the only thing that would have made it better is if they literally had his bare butt sticking out the back of the hospital gown. That would have been hilarious. But anyway,
that would have been funny.
It's him like sneaking out so that he can go back to work, because clearly the hospital staff are not going to discharge him. So he gets out of his window, and then this is Grant Page, clearly another stunt for the film, in his hospital gown, sort of rappels down the side of the hospital building.
Climbs down the side, yeah.
Yeah, sees this beautiful girl in a red convertible sports car and says, do you mind if I catch a quick ride with you? I've really got to go somewhere. And she says, sure. And again, this is straight out of a 13-year-old boy's like best dream ever. And that's how he meets the love interest. It's wild. She takes him straight to the, he drives. Takes her.
He drives. Yeah,
that's the other part
He's
of
like,
it.
Mind if I drive? And
she's like, not at all. She jumps into her own passenger seat, and they drive to the set of Undercover Girl.
If you call it driving, it's kind of stunt driving. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that story of her wanting to write a story about him is really the only plot line in this whole movie. It's the only thing that's going on, right? Really?
Yeah, no, it is. The only other thing that's sort of even a minor plot line in that vein is his co-star is also intrigued by him, and they sort of imply she has romantic feelings for him as well, but they never sort of fight over it. There's no catfighting or what have you. That's Monique, is his co-star. She's actually the namesake of Undercover Girl. Wants to do her own stunts and be her own woman. In fact, the next scene, she's arguing with her agent because she wants to do her own stunts, and the agent's resisting, and she says, how can I look my audience in the eye if I can't be authentic and real?
Yes.
And that made me laugh really hard, because I'm like, this actress this is so meta, This actress in this movie of all movies has to be really authentic.
Well, later on in the movie, she does that rappel down from the top of the building.
Yeah, that's got to be the actress.
That is her.
Yep.
So Grant Page taught her how to do that stunt. She went to Brian Trenchard Smith and she said, I've seen how this works. I know how this works. I want to do this stunt. Brian Trenchard Smith said to her, as long as it is okay with Grant, then I'm fine. So in other words, if your stuntman signs off on it, because he's got the responsibility, then he's fine with it. So she was shown how to do it, and she did it. And apparently, just as she was coming down, her husband was driving into the lot. And freaked out because she was doing this stunt.
Yeah. Well, to her credit, it's a really good shot. I mean, they set it up they clearly have two cameras, well, at least two cameras working, one from below, one from above. And it's a rappelling shot off of like an 8-story building, maybe 10-story building. Yeah. They literally this actress literally tips over the edge and is suspended, and it's a close up on her at the top. That's the shot from the top, and she says, "I'm okay." And then they switch to the bottom shot, and she rappels down like it's like a spider dropping on a web.
Hands-free.
And yeah, hands-free, sort of spread eagle. And it's impressive because they stay on her the whole time, one take. And as she becomes closer to the camera on the ground, you can clearly tell that's Monique Vandeven.
She wanted to do it a second time, apparently. And Brian Trenchard Smith's like, let's not push our luck.
You did great. We got the take. Your husband's here. No, that's it. That's all we're doing.
The husband apparently thought, oh, look at that stunt. That's great. They've got a really good likeness of her.
Yeah.
And then he turns up.
To his credit, like the rest of Undercover Girl, there's this, her double is this man who's about her size, who just kind of shows up. Like there's a stunt during the filming of the TV show where Grant jumps from one car into the other and then starts wrestling. I guess he's playing the baddie because he starts to grab her, quote unquote, air quotes, and it's this man in a blonde wig and fighting for control of the wheel. Mm. So I'm sure he thought, oh, look, it's Nick, my wife's stunt man. What a great stunt. Wait, what?
Yeah. What's her? Wow.
It was a great stunt though, because she gets closer, and and then suddenly you realize who it is, and there's this here comes beautiful Monique, and you're like, whoa! And her, what is really cool about it is at the end of it, he reels her in, catches her, puts her on her feet, and the adrenaline and exhilaration in her face is obviously authentic.
Yeah, she didn't need to act.
No,
at all.
No,
yeah.
Gives him a big hug. And I think she might even say something along the lines of, "Can we do that again?" or something,
yeah.
Which makes sense because that's what you do. It was fun, and you had got a rush out of it, so it was great.
You know what we haven't talked about yet, and that is the rock side of stunt rock.
I was going to say, dude, all we've been doing is, I can't believe we spoke for almost an hour about stunt.
But now we've got to get onto the rock.
Now we're going to rock for another hour.
So this band's sorcery is unbelievable. Like, they have this show, and Trenchard Smith is kind of like, well, they were like Kiss, but I didn't have to pay as much as I'd have to pay for Kiss. And they're just so classic. Like, he said he stumbled on them. I don't know how he stumbled. I'm assuming there was when I looked at the wiki, I think there was some mention that a casting agent or somebody discovered them. So I think obviously there was some work in the background. But he was absolutely amazed that he found this band that had this act that they did, where they had the heavy metal music, and then they had that nightly kind of every gig, clash of good and evil with the Merlin kind of guy and the demon guy.
It's basically it's Merlin versus the devil in the middle of a rock show. I mean, you can't get more 70s than that. You put your finger on it, man. This is like if they basically pushed Kiss off the edge of the stage. This is kind of what they would probably become. You know what's interesting, Pete? I know you're a musician and I'm a music fan. The music actually isn't bad. So basically the movie shows Grant coming to Los Angeles to join his to join the cast of Undercover Girl, but his cousin plays the devil in, or the Prince of Darkness, I think they call him, in the band Sorcery. He's part of the theatrical component of the band. So basically it switches between Grant doing his thing, and then at night they go watch Sorcery play a show, and they'll play several songs, and then they'll go back to Grant's story, and then he'll do stunts and try to win over Lois, and then they'll go back to hang out with the band and watch another song or two. Every time I watched the band play, they kept reminding me of several late 70s, early 80s other rock groups. So I came up with these. I'm curious to know what you think. So these are some of the bands / videos that I thought of. I thought of Rainbow's Street of Dreams. I thought of Ozzy's Bark at the Moon and its video. I thought of the song White Snake's song Slide It In. And the other bands that sort of it made me think of were Iron Maiden, Queen, Styx, and Saga.
And Spinal Tap.
And no doubt, like the original OG inspiration for Spinal Tap.
There was bits of their performances that I was getting Spinal Tap vibes. I was just waiting for something to go wrong. Obviously, nothing went wrong. But
it'd be stuck inside what was it? The pod.
The pod.
They were trying to get out of the pods.
And Stonehenge. Yeah.
Stonehenge. And that's kind of what it's like, because so in the middle of these songs, which again, the music isn't bad. I mean, it's not great. I don't want to like canonize these guys. They're a decent hard rock band. That's how just the music, but they kind of go the extra mile, and they have these two extra band members, one playing the Prince of Darkness, the other basically playing the ultimate wizard or Merlin or something, and they completely look the part classically, and they come out and they perform magic upon one another, like Merlin vanquishes the devil, and then the devil comes out and kills Merlin, but Merlin resurrects, and it's wild. You hit the nail on the head. This is a hard movie to talk about because it's difficult to describe.
Yeah, it's absolutely difficult to describe.
What are they doing? But it's fun.
It's really fun. Yeah,
it's fun. It's like a magic show in the middle of a rock concert.
Exactly, and some of the magic things are things you've probably seen before. You know, the one where you talked about where Merlin is killed or dies, and he's on that the sword thing, and it slides, and it looks like it's going through him.
Right,
and then he eventually gets himself off it, and the one where the Prince of Darkness has got like a sheet covering him, and he's got those lit up eyes, so you can say, oh, it must be him, and he catches on fire, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and then the sheet kind of falls, and there's just smoke. There's another one where they put him in a box that looks like the TARDIS from...
that's the lead singer. They do that too.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Yeah.
They
start off by putting the...
They put the devil into the TARDIS.
Yeah, that's right.
It looks like the TARDIS. I'm sorry. That's all I could think of was like the Doctor Who theme that whole time. But they put the devil in there, and then they basically put like long sliding machetes through it, like the cut the woman in half gag from the old vaudeville magic shows. And then they open, each individual box to show you, that he's still in there. Look, there's his head, and there's his torso. And then they take them all out again, and Merlin sort of throws a fireball at the box. And when they open it up, he's not in there, but the lead singer of the band is. And the devil's up in the rafters with his hands on fire, waving him around and laughing.
Overacting.
maniacally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of cool. I have to admit, it's fun.
I love the way the lead singer goes into the box, and he has they keep bringing out that little jeweled thing that they hypnotize each other with. That's obviously the bit. They're both their Achilles heel. Anyway, so the lead singer goes in with this really starey look in his face, and they've obviously got, they slice him up. And when they open the top, it's just his head sitting there on its own.
Yeah,
and it's in the same thing. And it's obviously like a plastic head or a wax head or something of the lead singer. And it's like they've had to say to him, now you need to practice. You've got to make your face look exactly like this fake head.
All right, I want you to watch the 1950s Vincent Price classic House of Wax and imitate that head exactly.
Exactly right. Yeah.
I think
so
you're
good.
right. And yeah, that it's interesting. They use the same little hypnotizing swinging crystal on one another. Like the magic show centers around, well, who's going to win this round, the devil or Merlin? Yeah. And in the meantime, there's this lead guitarist with, is that a mullet? That's not a mullet.
Oh man, the poodle hair.
I call
it poodle hair.
Like a poodle. He's basically has long crimped hair all the way around, except for in the front where he's cut it into bangs. So I think technically it's not a mullet, but boy, it sure looks like one. But to make matters worse, he has bleach blonde dyed each of the drapes on either side, so that, like you said, he looks like he has big poodle ears on either side and like crimped up poodle hair, and it's the kind of thing that when you see it, you can't stop laughing. But at the time, people were like, "Oh, I want to get with that guy. He's a hot rock star." That one. In fact, there's a scene later. Do you remember that scene later? And there's a party they have a big party somewhere at somebody's big expensive Hollywood mansion. And there's this for some reason, they linger on this lead guitarist guy basically making out with this girl in the most intense way. They are really into each other. They don't stop. It doesn't look like they breathe for about 2 minutes. Their faces are just halfway buried into one another. And for some reason, Trenchard Smith sort of lingered on that. I'm not quite sure why, unless
I think they like through the movie with the band thing, the sorcery thing, they're trying to build that whole mystique around rock bands. And, there's the scene where they're in the studio and I was thinking, wow, when you record, it's nothing like that, because they're in the recording studio and they're kind of performing, right? Whether there's anyone there or not, just the engineer, or whether, Grant Page and the other two girls are with him or not. And I'm like, it's not like that in the studio at all. In the studio, you're kind of in your own little box and you're just concentrating on what's going, and you're not performing at all, right?
Well, they're all in the same room, and they're in it's not a studio. It looks like a big soundstage, right?
Yeah, it looks like it, but it's supposed to be a recording studio. Yeah, and I'm thinking the mic bleed would have been the worst. But
well, let's see here. So there's the lead singer is sort of a thin blonde dude, kind of he reminded me of I can't remember the guy's name. He's the guitarist from Styx. That's who he reminded me of. The bass player is sort of a standard issue Donald Duck Dunn. Just groovy dude in the
big
background.
Curly hair, yeah.
We already talked about poodle hair lead guitarist dude. I think that guy's name is Smokey. He's pretty good. The drummer's in the back with like a top hat, playing with a top hat the whole time. And then for good measure, there's a keyboardist who
oh man,
who always has like a wrestling mask on
and a really high pitched voice
and a crazy, like a voice that doesn't make any sense. Well, they stop and she says, like they're playing and because so Grant has brought Lois to his cousin's gig because he wants to. By the way, I don't even know why the Devil and the Wizard are there at the studio. They don't need to be there. It's the band. It's the band that needs to be there. But I guess they're part of the band, so they're hanging out. And she introduces. She goes over after the recording. She talks to the keyboardist, and she says something along the lines of, "Is that how does that hood feel? Do you always wear that hood?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's got a ridiculously high voice. You know what it reminded me of? This is gonna. I don't know if you've seen it, but I think Jacob has. I don't know if Tab has, but there was a terrible movie in the 70s with Kiss in it called was it Kiss in the
Attack of the Phantoms?
Phantom in the Park or something?
Yeah, in Australia it was called Kiss and the Attack of the Phantoms or something like that. But yeah, another one.
And in that film, Ace Frehley would just, for some reason, he would laugh, and he had the most ridiculous little chirp laugh that kind of went, ha! Like something sounded kind of like that. And this guy, the keyboardist, the masked keyboardist in Sorcery, reminded me of Ace Frehley from that movie. It's that kind of comedy, you know.
Yeah, it's weird. And then later in the movie, someone says, asks him to take the mask off, and he takes the mask off, and there's another mask under it.
He takes off the silver one, and there's a red one underneath.
Yeah, for a minute I thought it was going to be revealed that it was a woman, not a man. I don't know. Maybe it was supposed to be ambiguous, right? It's quite interesting. But yeah, that's really interesting. For me, watching the band was great, and watching the drummer, because I'm a drummer myself, it was great. Like, whenever I watch these movies, I'm always dating the drum set, and I'm always saying, okay. And it was a Ludwig kit, and I was looking at it as like, it's got the really high toms at the top and the cymbals up really high. So it was very 70s sort of looking. And sometimes they'd go around the back of the drum kit, and I'd look at those concert tom heads, which are the ones sitting up really high. And I was like, wow, he really needs to replace those drum heads. They look so worn. And,
yeah.
But this guy, the drummer, right, I looked him up, as I do. His name's Perry Morris, right? And he was a session drummer who'd played with Harry Nilsson, John Denver, the Coasters, Joni Mitchell, things like that. So he'd done all this sort of commercial work, and he'd done jingles and things like that as well. So he was a session player who joined this band, and he was very good financially. After the band, he became a financial advisor with Morgan Stanley.
Oh my gosh.
And unfortunately he passed away 2020, but yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Quite interesting.
So let's see, we have a financial advisor from Morgan Stanley, retired stuntman who's still coordinating, and a doctor of philosophy of Byzantine history. I mean, what's not to love here with this?
What interesting.
With this cast. And the other thing that should be noted is that, at least in my opinion, look, clearly this wasn't meant to garner Oscar attention or anything like that. But by the same token, the band, they kind of play themselves. They play themselves as members of Sorcery, and they show them backstage discussing shows and problems gone awry and things of what it's like for life on the road and things. They don't focus a lot on them, but they're not the worst actors I've ever seen.
No, I think they're probably asked to act naturally. There's a whole scene where at the party, I think it's at the party, the journalist is asking them about what it's like being in a band, and the guitar player with the big hair, the Donald Duck Dunn guy, kind of talks about what it's like playing live, and he actually misses lines a couple of times. He kind of starts to say something, then he repeats it, but it sounds really natural, like he's just explaining what it's like, and he goes into it a bit over the top with the whole, we feel like we're being lifted from the ground by the crowd and all this sort of stuff. And but it's really interesting, and you can tell it's kind of coming from him, not really scripted.
Yeah.
By the sounds of it.
Well, again, to go back to the Phantom, Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park, where those guys clearly decided we're going to play these cartoon, that they were directed, or they decided we're going to play these cartoon version of ourselves, and it came out looking really silly. Unless you're a massive Kiss fan, it's really kind of stupid. I mean, not to say this isn't stupid, but
that's basically because in that movie, Peter Criss and Ace Frehley were pretty much off their faces the whole time.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, they were not exactly sober.
They were not healthy at the time. Yeah,
but for the purposes of this film, like, there's some funny moments where in the studio they said, well, let's go get a bite to eat, and the devil and Merlin are the characters, the actors, if you will, the band members, are constantly pulling little tricks out of their hat, so to speak, for not just on the stage, but for each other and for visitors and for people at the party and that kind of a thing.
They do a trick with a cigarette and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, cigarette appears out of nowhere, and then the devil, so that Merlin makes a cigarette appear to give to Monique, and she's like, they always look, wow. Not to be outdone, the devil walks by and lights his own hand on fire and says, "Need a light?"
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that's the crossover, right? Is that they have an interest in stunts, and then it all comes full circle because the guy who plays the Prince of Darkness, which is his name is Curtis Hyde, and he's in the film. He's supposed to be Grant Page's cousin. Talks Grant into coming by and doing a stunt during one of the sorcery shows that Monique and Lois watch, and that kind of sums up the
this
film.
Is kind of the climax, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like, well, these worlds finally collide. We've been waiting for an hour and a half, man, for this whole thing.
And the whole way they film that as well, like they come down, the Prince of Darkness's little helpers come down and grab him from the crowd.
Yeah, it looks like they've sort of randomly selected somebody. Of course, it's Grant going, "What, me?
What, me? Yeah." And of course, Lewis and what's her name? Monique.
Lois and Monique, yeah.
Lois and Monique both they actually look like they didn't know it was going to happen. Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, why wouldn't you tell them it was going to happen? And they look like they're, oh my God, what's going to happen to him? And
it's very dramatic.
It is. They look like they're going through some sort of trauma, right? And they put him up in the chair and they look like they're going to set him on fire. And he comes down, he rappels down through the crowd and onto the stage at the very end. And
yeah, they light a dummy on fire. And in this little hyped up throne chair. And of course, Monique and Lois are like, oh, no, Grant, how dare you? He's my boyfriend. And then, like you said, he repels. And this is actually kind of cool because it literally did come 360 degrees, where at the beginning of the film, the first stunt is him rappelling down a steep line into the gap, the water at the gap. And at the end, it's him rappelling down kind of a similar line on stage with sorcery. And they're like, Mr. Grant Page, everybody. And everybody takes a bow. And then he jumps off the stage to simultaneously hug both beautiful women in the band, says, this one goes out to you, Mr. Grant Page. And they play a song called Stunt Rocker, right? It's the theme. It's all about, I wish I couldn't. I had a hard time understanding the lyrics, Pete, but
same.
They were something along the lines of, you're a stunt rocker and everybody loves you. You get the chicks, and I mean that's basically
it's basically it. Right?
That's pretty much the whole thing.
Yeah,
yeah. Oh, it was fun. It all came together at the end, man. It's not going to win any awards, but he did. He pulled it together.
When he went back to the women at the end, to the girls at the end of the film, and he was hugging them, all I could think of was the end of Rocky. I was waiting for some kind of like freeze frame, slow motion into a freeze frame sort of thing, but that didn't happen.
Have him yell from the stage, Lois, Lois,
I did it.
Yeah, there's another stunt in so the whole movie is he does a stunt in Australia. He goes to the States to be a stunt coordinator and stuntman for the Undercover Girl. And his cousin picks him up from the airport, who's in this band. So it goes stunts, back to band, from the band to the stunts, back to the band, to the stunts, to the band. That's
all it does, really.
Yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. It probably does that about 6 or 7 times. But there's a point at which there's the drama, if you will, in the story is that Lois doesn't want to hang out with Grant anymore because she's afraid she's going to watch him kill himself. And so this tells you how 70s it is, to win her back, instead of, basically saying mea culpa or, leaving the field, or he ups the stakes and, basically
ever so slightly
basically climbs out on a wire suspended between 2 buildings, and her flat is in the building right between the two, and he's brought a phone with him handily, a wired phone, by the way, it looks like.
Yeah.
And calls her and says, look out the window. And she says, what? He's just like, yeah, just go look out the window. and she goes over there and she can't believe he's suspended. By the way, in the lo-fi version I watched, you can't see the wire. It looks like he's floating.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can't see the rope and you can't see a wire. So it literally looks like he's just floating in midair. And he says, I came to invite you to a party. And she's like, what? And he's, get down from there. And he says, well, I'm not getting down until you say yes. I'm like, yeah, that's about what a 13-year-old would think is the way to get a girl.
Exactly. I love the way he's got the phone. I mean, when you think of it, though, you think of that stunt that he actually did. So he's not connected to anything, right? He's just climbing across that wire.
Yeah.
And he's got that phone in his jacket, and he goes through the whole thing of pulling it out, and it takes him an eternity to do. Because I'm thinking, wow, if you handle this the wrong way, and you kind of stop thinking about what you're actually doing and think about the phone, you're gone. You're off the wire.
Fall off the wire.
Because it's very, it's amazing. It was pretty cool.
I also noticed that when he actually, now to be fair, it probably isn't exactly the wire that he went out on, but when he attaches the wire to the eyelet on the building, he uses a clove hitch. And I'm thinking, well, it's pretty secure, dude, but that could slip.
Yeah.
I was just like, I used my own, sailing experience, and I was like, dude, use something stronger than that.
I thought that too.
If you want to make it to the party.
I'm like, that's not super secure, is it?
Not to be fair, but I would presume, given the little that I know of Grant Page, that he actually tied it the way he would tie it to go out and do the stunt. Even though
I don't know much about knots. I'm assuming is it one of those knots that, well, you said it would slip, so maybe not. But I thought maybe it's one of those knots that the more pressure that gets put on it, the tighter it kind of grips to itself or something like that.
Well, in theory, what he did was he tied a clove hitch, and then he wrapped an anchor band around the clove hitch, and then he put an overhand loop as a stopper. So that it's not likely to completely unravel because of he basically put 3 knots in one. However, it could slip, and all you have to do is like a sudden slack in the line, and this dude is
he's gone
on the deck of the pool below. There actually is kind of a really cute little. There are cute little moments of the film. For instance, in this particular scene, the director spends a lot of time on this very cute little chubby faced baby being in a walker, being walked by his mom. Who sees him and has these little cute little baby face reactions to this Spider-Man 200 feet up in the air. That's really cute. And then in the other cute moment, I had to bring it up because I loved it, was for some reason in the studio there are 2 dogs.
Yeah.
Who either live there or came with the band members.
I think they're with the band because one of them's at the show, at the after party. It looks like they're taking a break in the middle of the show, and they've got the big sort of band table with all the exotic foods and all that, and they're feeding it spaghetti. Yeah, they're hand feeding
this doggy, and he has he has his own little Merlin hat on. And also, there was the other dog, I think it was the other dog in the studio, there were 2, was laying on the mixer. And the minute I saw that, I took a note. I'm like, completely unrealistic. Pete's going to blow this one out of the water. Because I love dogs, but he's going to mess up all the settings. There's no way you would put the dog on the mixer.
Yeah, you just wouldn't have all that. Yeah, you just wouldn't do it.
That dog messed up every setting.
Exactly. Yeah, they had to re-record the whole album because of the dog. So
as you do.
The album, as you do, right? Yeah. The soundtrack to this you can actually buy on vinyl. It came out on vinyl. I looked it up on Discogs. A mint version of this soundtrack is between 70 and 100 Australian dollars. So I did think about it, but
yeah, for what you're getting, it's a little steep, I would think. But it's not. They're not bad. It's not like you're listening to
2 LPs. Yeah. One's a picture disc. So I was like, oh, that'd be pretty good. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'll pull the trigger on that one. But.
Well, it'd be fun for a lark, and you could imagine.
Yeah, it'd be good to have in the collection. So.
Yeah, and you can imagine the magic show happening. But yeah, and it is so of its time because it's clear that somebody in the band was like, well, we're pretty good, but we have to have a gimmick. That's the only way we're going to make it. So what about The Devil versus Merlin? What do you think? It's kind of like if somebody gave Kiss really bad advice.
Yeah. Let's do a magic show in the middle. Yeah.
But it was for the film. It was entertaining.
Yeah. Brian Trenchard Smith, I think he said the band broke up like pretty much straight after the movie. Their Wikipedia says they went on a bit longer. They went on to like 87 or something. But I think maybe as a band, he said what happened or what he heard had happened is that the magician side of it thought they were the most important people in it. The musician side of it thought they were the most important people. So it was kind of one of those, one of us has got to go sort of thing. So I'd say the band maybe continued on as just the band, maybe. I don't know. If someone knows, let me know. But it looks like the magic side of it kind of petered out. I would have thought it would have been a great Vegas show. And apparently, reading their wiki, they did do a couple of shows in Vegas. So.
Yeah, you're right. That actually makes sense. Like if you, and that's where it would have come to a head, right? Is this a rock show or is this a magic show? But that's pretty much the only place on earth they would probably flourish because, I mean, it was cool, but the other thing I kept thinking of was like the pyrotechnics are such that somebody's going to get hurt, man, eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
With the stunts, you knew somebody was going to get hurt. With the rock show, you don't necessarily expect somebody to, have to jump off the stage on fire or whatever. And the setup of this band, yeah, somebody's going to get burned or fall off the stage or, yeah.
This is another movie because of its time. I love the shots of the crowd because of the clothing they're wearing and the way they look. It just takes me
totally
back.
Into it. Like, woo! People are screaming and like pumping the air,
jumping around,
shaking their hips, and I'm like, yeah. Don't know if it's that kind of show, but
no.
Okay. I mean, hey, whatever makes you happy.
I found it interesting. Normally, when I do these episodes, I'll have a section where I'll just note down a couple of scenes. But this show has like, we've just talked about half a dozen scenes anyway, but this show is kind of like, it doesn't have anything that kind of stands out and says this is a pivotal scene or this is a pivotal scene. It's like, they just, like you said, it's stunts, then the rock, then the stunts, then the rock, then the stunts, then the rock.
And then
at the end, it's quite
stunt rock.
Stunt rock. At the end, Lewis, the journalist, suddenly decides she's going to write a story about the stunt and the rock. And that's how we get the name of the movie. And you get the fake, is it Time magazine or something? I
think it's the cover. They're on the cover of Time. And it's funny because at the concert, she just kind of, you can almost see the little light bulb go on over her head that she's wait a minute, stunt, rock. And everybody who's watching the film is like, why did it take you an hour and a half? We've known that from the beginning. But
we've been living this, yeah.
And the tagline to Stunt Rock is something along the lines of like, finally, or, as it should be, or something like that. It was great.
It is good. It's really fun. I think it was interesting. It wasn't really till the end that Grant Page looks like he made his decision on which woman it was going to be. He was kind of, for the rest of the remainder of the movie, or most of the movie leading up to that, he was kind of a bit aloof with both the women. They were both interested in him, but he was kind of really he didn't seem like he was very interested. Do you know what I mean? Romantically.
Yeah. Well, part of me wonders if that was a character choice or because he's like, well, I can't just be like mauling the wife of the director. I know she's supposed to give her a big
kiss at the end anyway.
That's true, but I'm like, I know she's supposed to be a love interest, but geez, the director's right there. you know, I got to take it easy.
It might have been a little bit awkward, actually. Yeah.
Truly. But the other thought I had was that, I mean, if this is probably diving too deep, I don't know if Grant was thinking these things, but the character is supposed to really, truly just be, and that's why she's attracted to him, all about the work. truly just about the work. And clearly he puts in a great deal of time in his craft, and he's very good at it. I don't know if it would have been my personal choice as a filmmaker to make an entire feature about it. But
was there another movie called The Stuntman or something years ago?
I know Lee
70s
Majors
or in
did a
the
TV
80s?
show called The Fall Guy, which was
Right, and he was a stuntman, right?
yeah, he played a stuntman. That was
Yeah.
his role in the film or in the TV series. But I don't know about I mean, FX was a film mostly about special effects with occasional few little stunts, as I recall.
So there was a movie called The Stuntman in 1980. It was a comedy thriller,
Okay.
and it starred Peter O'Toole, Steve Railsback, who is in Turkey Shoot, another Brian Trenchard Smith
Nice.
movie, and Barbara Hershey.
Oh my goodness. That's
Interesting.
There's
Yeah.
some
So it's
marquee
called
names
Stuntman.
for that one.
Says it's on Disney Plus, or is that just Stuntman? Maybe it's different. The Stuntman. Anyway.
All right, Pete.
Yeah,
We're going to segue right into a commentary on Stuntman.
Yeah, so there's been a few movies about stuntmen and things like that. You just reminded me, FX is a great movie.
Oh, it's great. It is fantastic. And that stars another Aussie, doesn't it?
Brian Brown,
Yeah.
I think.
Brian Brown.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
outstanding.
Yeah.
You know, you just reminded me of something. You said stuntmen. To be fair, there is a little. This movie is so all over the place. There's a part pretty much right in the middle of the movie where the point of no return in a more sequenced, nuanced storytelling film would be, that basically goes briefly into the history of stunts. And they do a black and white sort of biplane excursion stunts, like the earliest stunts. I think they called it acrobatic, like acrobats who decided they wanted more.
Yeah, people hanging from planes.
They wanted
and
more
stuff.
airtime, no pun intended. And then they talk, and I wish I had written it down. They do talk about a famous husband-wife stunt person team. So, and also, to be fair, Monique is trying very hard to do her own stunts as well. So as much as this is really all about, it's really a Grant Page showcase. They don't completely, and even though it is set in the 70s and it was a different time, they don't completely take for granted that there are women involved in the field. I guess that was the point that I was going to bring up. And then another reason I thought of that was because I keep thinking of Zoe Bell. Do you know Zoe?
Okay, yeah. She's
Bell.
been in she's been in some Tarantino movies.
She's Tarantino films. I think she actually had an acting role in Death Proof. And I think she's a Kiwi, if I remember correctly.
She was also in Hateful Eight.
Yeah. Yeah, she's a very I don't think she's a pretty good actress, and clearly
Yeah, she's New Zealander. Yeah, she's a good actress, but her main thing is stunts.
Yeah, she's excellent. So, yeah, as much as this is like really all about Grant Page, let's face it, they did a little bit of a tribute not only to the history of stunts in film, but also acknowledge the fact that women were involved as well. So it was pretty cool.
It's interesting though, in that section, it's kind of like the movie changes pace completely and suddenly becomes a documentary.
I know, man, and goes black and white at that. Right? It's
like, what am I watching?
Like, if you watch this, like if somebody watched this stoned, that might make a lot more sense actually.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
I
don't know either.
Yeah, it's like it's a movie about stuntmen and it's about rock music, and there's a little documentary stuck in the middle, and there's the bits where Grant Page is talking about his scrapbook that he happens to have brought with him of, he eventually wants to write a book about stunts, which he actually did. I think around 2009, Grant Page released a book about his career and
Very
stuff
cool.
like that. I think it was about
I read
2009.
that.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I was going to look it up. And he's got his scrapbook, and they've just been to a sorcery show. And for some reason, he says to Lewis, "Oh, wait, I'm going to go and get something." He comes back with his scrapbook that he gives her to go through, to look through. And I'm like, why would you have brought that to a concert?
Well, it's kind of it's almost like a starving artist carrying around their portfolio being like, take a look at this. get me a job, will you? What do you think? But you're right. It's very peculiar. I don't know why you would have that just hanging around. And like I said, he tries to impress her in these ways that a 13-year-old boy would impress her, because she leaves the set because she's worried about his safety. So what does he do in response? Climbs out on a line in front of her flat. It's kind of like, I don't know if that's going to do anything to settle her down, buddy.
Yeah. Not when she's concerned about you killing yourself.
Now, if you don't go out with me, I'm going to fall off this wire like that. I don't know if that's the right.
Well, he ends up hanging there, right?
He literally goes to one hand and he says, "I'm going to let go unless you say yes." And it's kind of like, boy, the manipulative bastard.
That was actually interesting, and I was just thinking about wrapping up. But anyway, just before we do that, I was thinking about that scene, and there's a scene which I thought was pretty interesting. The scene after that, when he's talking to her on the roof, and he makes this analogy, or he talks about being afraid of heights, and he's saying that when you're just standing on the floor somewhere, you can walk along a straight line, and you don't feel like you're going to trip over or fall at all. But if you put yourself on a ledge where there's no room either side, that's when you feel like you're going to fall. And he was basically saying the difference between you and me, or stuntmen and normal people, is we feel as steady on that narrow ledge as we do on standing on solid ground, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Fascinating. He does give these. You're right. There are specific moments through the film where he gives kind of really cool insight to the thought process. There's one other thing I wanted to ask you about, and I've watched the film twice now, because in prep for your episode, because I wanted to be able to talk to you about it reasonably. But there's in either Wikipedia or IMDb, they list Phil Hartman as a cast member, and I didn't see him either time. Did you?
This is Phil Hartman, as in the Phil Hartman that.
Yeah, Phil Hartman from SNL.
I didn't see. Yeah,
and they list him as Monique's assistant.
I didn't even see Monique's assistant.
No,
unless he was kind of in it and it got cut or something like that. There might have been a scene.
Yeah, maybe. Because boy, he would have been to be fair, he would have been a way better. Her manager was not a very good actor, and her agent, and he would have been great in that role. Presumably he was unknown at the time, but so they list Phil Hartman in the cast. Crazy, huh?
Very, very interesting. I wonder if it's the same Phil Hartman.
I think so. I clicked the link and it took me right to him. I didn't.
Oh yeah, Saturday Night Live. Yeah.
I didn't see him though, and I watched for him very carefully because obviously he went on to bigger things.
I would just think maybe I'll have to watch it again, which I will one day, and look out for him. But I'd say maybe he had a scene that was cut, or something like that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to find out. Let me know if they mention him on the Blu-ray.
I will.
What have you?
I will. I haven't had to listen to the commentary yet, but I'll sit down one day over the Christmas break and have a listen to the commentary.
Cool.
So seeing I have some more time, that's great. So. Anything in closing on this movie?
I really only have two words for you, Pete. Stunt rock. Stunt rock.
So good. Stunt rock.
Because even if you just say it
great.
like that, it kind of gives you an idea, truly, about what this film is about.
You kind of know what the movie's about. Yeah. It's very literal, isn't it?
Yeah, the stunts are very cool,
exactly,
and the rock is not bad. And there's also Merlin and the Devil. And girls in jumpsuits.
Exactly.
That's all you need.
What more could you ask for?
I'm clear that's clearly what Trenchard Smith thought in the shower.
It's exactly. All right, cool. So, Jay, what are you up to? Anywhere? Doing any podcasts? I know you've got one you do very occasionally. Anything happening there?
Very occasionally is a kind way to put it. I have precisely 2 full, polished, finished episodes of Clock Strikes Midnight, and at this point, it's becoming a biannual podcast. That was So, but I love coming on to your show, and I am amongst Well, first of all, it's a joy to talk to you, and it truly is, Pete. You're a lot of fun to discuss these films with. Frankly,
Thank
and
you.
you brought me two films that I can safely say to you, I never would have watched either one on my own. Would not have been, certainly not this one, and probably not Wake in Fright. And then I also realized I'm in really, really good company. So there's the lovely Tab, Jacob, the gentleman. You've had Sketches, Dr. Brandon, Jeremy, I think. I was on once prior. And then, of course, Lewis, who just makes everything better. Any podcast with Lewis is just better because he's Lewis.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun with Body Melt. I don't know if you've listened to that one yet, but we had a lot of fun.
I loved it. In fact, I said on when I read your posting, I was like, because any of those great guests could have done it justice, but when I read it, was for some reason when I saw that you talked about it with Lewis, I was like, yes, it just made sense.
It was interesting because I think he might have said it in the episode, I'm not sure, but when I approached him to do another episode, I said, look, here's the big list. I usually send everyone that Wikipedia article on Ozploitation, and there's like 5 billion films listed. Yeah. You know, I was like, just pick a film out of these. And he said, is Body Melt too recent? Because it's 1990 or something like that. And I was like, man, that is a fucking great movie to do. So, and it was always my intention to do it. And it's very much a show that you would think they would do on, Gory Picture Show as well.
Yeah, I would be surprised if they don't get to it. And in your own words, it's the Ozploitation of the 70s, 80s, and beyond.
Yeah. And beyond, well, I have changed it a little bit so I can go reach a bit further. That was like that with Starstruck with Tab, and which is pretty much a musical. And but we loved that one, and that one was really popular.
Yeah,
too.
that was Tab is just a joy. She's such a lovely, wonderful
she's
person.
Good fun.
So.
She's good fun.
Yeah, and so knowledgeable, which is why I hope I did Stunt rock some justice, man, because. Well, I mean, there's only so much you can describe. Okay, here's what happens. Merlin comes out throwing fireballs, okay? The devil falls backwards. And then the band goes into coda.
Well, not only did I get the Stunt and the rock, I got the JX and the Dill.
Man.
And it was just perfect. So thanks so much for coming on. This is my last show this season, so it's great to have you on for the last episode for this year.
Oh, that's an honor. Well, happy Christmas and Merry New Year to you, sir.
It's great. I'm looking forward to getting into next season. I've got some interesting movies. I think next year we're going to get into Mad Max, so that'll be a lot of fun getting into those movies. Grant Page did stunts on Mad
Did
Max
he really?
as well. So
okay, well, yeah. I always look forward to seeing Dingo movie pop up in my podcast feed, Pete, so I'm looking forward to that.
Well, thank you for coming on.
You got it, mate. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Take it easy.
Well, that brings us to the end of the first season of A Dingo Ate My Movie. I'd like to thank all my co-hosts, Brandon, Tab, Jay, Lewis, Jacob, Sketches, and Jeremy for making the time to record and bring your knowledge and, most importantly, your distinctive personalities to the show. Thanks to everyone who's taken the time to listen this year. It's been great creating content for you all. I hope you're enjoying it. Don't forget you can follow A Dingo Ate My Movie on social media. We're at Dingo Movie on Twitter, Dingo Movie Pod on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on the web at dingomoviepod.com. If you enjoy the show and would like to show your support, you can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com/dingomoviepod. And finally, I love getting feedback, so please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or over on Spotify. Or drop me a line at pete@dingomoviepod.com. I take all feedback seriously. It helps me to improve the show for you and for all the other listeners. Once again, thanks for listening, stay safe, and I'll see you next year on A Dingo Ate My Movie.